You read a novel, it's fiction. Although this is an historical novel, it's based on real events. So there are real references to what actually happened, but it is a story. It is, at its heart, false, okay? So you're reading the story as you would read any story, hoping to figure out who the main characters are and the dramatic moments. If you do that, and you're awake while you're reading, then you should do well on the quiz. You have to put a whole lot more energy and thought into reading the text, and that's what this seminar is about this morning. How to read this text in particular, but any text in any subject. If you apply these principles, you will read for greater understanding, greater retention, and therefore you will do better on the exams. I've had a number of students over the years come to me, either during the semester or even at the end of their academic career, and tell me that this hour, this whatever 45 minutes, was one of the most important class times that they had. So I hope that is the case for you. But no one is going to look over your shoulder and see if you're doing these things that I have suggested this morning. So if you don't like this, if it's too much effort, doesn't work for you, you've already got a good system, great. That's fine. First off, reading a text, there's a method to this requirement. If you're like me, when I was in high school and all the way through my undergraduate career, I just started reading. And I didn't have a method, I didn't have questions in mind. I just started reading, and I was hoping, of course, that the appropriate material, the material that's going to be on the test, would somehow stick to my gray cells. And I read it often enough, and I had good memory and so forth, that I didn't really need any other method as an undergraduate or in high school. And so it worked out okay. I got where I wanted to go. But in grad school, I finally realized that there's a better way. And so what I'm going to show you or demonstrate to you is what I think the better way. So the first thing we understand then is that you don't just start reading the text and just plow into the words and hope everything that you need is going to stick. That isn't an analytical way of reading. So what that means is you've got to know the title. How many of you know the title of the text right now without looking it up? There you go. You're just like me. The title of the text is Land of Hope. Land of Hope. And so you have to keep the title in mind in order to understand what the author is trying to communicate to you. Logical question from understanding that title is, who is hoping for what? It's a history class, it's about people, so who's doing the hoping? What do they hope for? And if you understand that, you see the answers to that question as you go through the reading, that is going to lead you towards something that's important. But right out of the gate, you see this is going to be a little bit more work than just opening the text and starting to read, okay? You're going to have thoughts in your mind and things you are looking for. You're going to be like a detective who's looking for clues. A good detective understands the evidence. That's what you are looking for, is the evidence, right? So have questions in mind. Look for the answers as you're reading. That's the methodology right there. The rest of this seminar is about what are the right questions. So keep those titles in mind. In some texts, the book is divided not only into chapters, and of course, there's the chapter title, right? So you have the title of the book, you have the title of the chapter. Keep the chapter title in mind because that's what the chapter's about. And then in some texts, then you have subdivisions, subheadings. Pay attention to the subheadings. Those direct you to important questions. Sometimes the subheading will direct you away from being all that concerned about what follows, because you already understand that that subheading is about something that's not all that important. So avoid the rock pile theory of history or of any topic. That is, everything is of equal importance and therefore equally likely to be on a test. That is not true in history. It's not true in any discipline, right? So look for the answers to specific questions. So let's look at the first page of our text. the introduction, one long story. An introduction to any book tells you some of the values, the ideas of the writer. And writers follow what interests them, what they think is important. So introductions are always crucial. Read the introduction carefully, as opposed to saying, well, this isn't really the history yet, I'll just skip that. You skip then the clues as to what's important in the text if you did that. So he begins, there are already dozens of highly competent, lavishly illustrated, and meticulously detailed accounts of the history of the United States. Yes, that is right. Why write a new book? And this is a new book. Well, that's going to tell you. His reasons for writing the book is going to give you some kind of an idea as to what's important. So he answers, I have something different to say from the others there in the first paragraph. You, the reader, will have to be ultimate judge as to whether I've been successful or not. But let me first take a few words to describe some of my guiding intentions. In other words, major ideas, important thoughts that I've had in writing this text. Its principal objective. What does the word principle mean? If you don't know, you have to look it up. But in this case, he might have said its most important objective, its primary objective, its principal objective. The reason I wrote this book is, you have to know that. It's very simple. To offer to American readers, young and old alike, an accurate, responsible, coherent, persuasive, and, keyword, inspiring narrative, meaning the story, narrative, story, of their own country, an account that will inform and deepen their sense of the land they inhabit and equip them for the privilege and responsibilities of citizenship. Citizenship here encompasses something larger than the civics class meaning. It means a vivid and enduring sense of one's full membership in one of the great enterprises in human history, the astonishing, perilous, and immensely consequential, important story of one's own country. Inspiring. He wants to inspire you to value the history of the United States. It is not intended to destroy your faith in your country. Quite the opposite. I could have assigned you any number of texts that were designed to destroy or at least cause you to deeply question the value of your country by demonstrating that its history is really not worth your respect or time. This is not the intention of the author of your text. I could have had you read a very popular text by Howard Zinn. Anybody recognize Zinn's name? Zinn is one of the most influential historians of the 20th century. His history, A People's History of the United States, what does that title tell you? Do you know the code? If you don't know the code, then this is an important moment. A people's history is code for a socialist/communist interpretation of the history of the United States. Do you think that is going to be especially admiring of a democratic capitalist country? No, the purpose of Howard Zinn's book for 50 years has been to diminish the American people's loyalty to their government. It is the most instructive socialist/communist interpretation of our past. And it's very popular. See? Completely the opposite of Maclay's interpretation. So whenever you see that terminology, peoples, what is the official title of China? Title of the country? The People's Republic of China. Okay? It's code for a socialist/communist ideology or state. Let's turn the page. And now at the bottom of the second page, and by the way, before I mention that, the first page of any chapter is crucial. You can afford to fall asleep somewhere in the middle of the chapter, but you cannot afford to fall asleep on page 1 and on what other page of a chapter? The last page. On page 1, the author sets up the chapter and tells you what they're trying to do, that is, if they're a good writer. And on the last page, they summarize what they've done. They hit the most important points. If I was coming into class and I had forgotten to read my assignment, on the way over here, I would read the first page and I would read the last page. You can do that while you're walking. I know it because I see everybody doing it as they watch it, in their phones in front of their face. Sorry, that was a little dig there. My sense of humor, got to let me have my moments there. So that's what I would do if I hadn't read. I'd read that first page really fast with my questions in mind, and I'd read that last page, and I'd say, all right, Lord, I need some help. So there you go. Now, what is Maclay interested in? Bottom of the next page. As will be clear, I have chosen to emphasize the political history of the United States at every turn. Treating it as the skeleton of the story, the narrative, so think in terms of that narrative just means story. Its indispensable underlying structure. This emphasis is particularly appropriate for the education of American citizens. You need to understand the political history of your past. What might a text have emphasized instead? Good question. Because this used to be the way that all texts were in American history. The political history was dominant, followed by diplomacy. And then what? Thank you. Military history, because the results of wars are crucial. By the way, that's a question. You always want to keep in mind what was the cause of the war I'm reading about and what was the result. This is not West Point or the Naval Academy, so I'm not going to ask you to relate the actual campaigns very often. Battle of Gettysburg, whatever it might be, Battle of Yorktown. Yeah, I'll talk about them in a lecture for a moment, but more likely I'm going to ask you what the cause of a war was or what the result of the war was. Because in knowing causes of wars, we might be able to avert a war. In knowing results of wars, we know how that war impacted what? The political history of the United States. Why we are the way we are. See? And that's ultimately what Maclay is interested in. It's what I'm interested in. I want you to understand why this country is the way it is. That's politics. Texts have been written about the arts. Now, art can reflect politics, but art for art's sake, right? Science. And as is very popular today, a history textbook might not focus on political events very much. It might focus on those Americans or groups that don't get a lot of attention in a traditional political history text. It's called social history. And in, I would say, probably half of America's classrooms, perhaps more, that's the kind of text they're going to read. And the political history is not all that concerning. That is not this text. Now, Maclay is going to tell you about this or that group every once in a while, but that's not his point. He's not going to tell you about what people wore or what they ate. And when he does, you can ignore it. It's not political history. We want to know about the political events that have shaped our lives. See, things that are still relevant. That's why you're sitting here. Now, you can go study what people ate and what they read and things like that in another class, but that's not the purpose of a general ed class. You can read books about it if that interests you, but that's not our purpose here. So when you get to a few pages about something like that, you can safely ignore it. Sports history. Couldn't care less until Jackie Robinson comes to the major leagues. Why? Now, it's not part of this class because our class ends in 1877. But Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier in the major leagues had an impact on the political history of the United States. So in the next paragraph, we see that history is the study of change through time. What is history? Everything that happened in the past. That's the common definition of the word history. Everything that happened in the past is history. What you had for lunch yesterday is history, right? Yeah, theoretically. But that's not academic. History is the study of change through time. If nothing is changing, history of the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, right? 1157 for a date. How is that different from 1193? Not much. Okay. But here in America, for most of our lives, most of our existence, I should say, as a country, change comes quickly. History changes quickly, especially in your life. So history is the study of change through time. That is the definition of history. Might that have been a quiz question? Yeah. Would have been a good one, too. What are we studying here? Down at the end of the paragraph, Maclay says, but by and large, history is interested in the eruptions of the extraordinary into the flow of the regular. So history is interested in the dramatic, the transformative. See? Not the static. This book extends a come-as-you-are invitation, the beginning of the next paragraph, and as such, it attempts to be a friendly point of entry. That is, not much prior knowledge of history is expected coming in, a friendly point of entry. The academic word of the day for this is accessible. Oh, it's a very accessible book. It's a very accessible class. So now you know what that word means. For both sorts of readers, those who are quite advanced and those who are just beginning, this is the last paragraph now, I try to keep before us the recognition that history is not just an inert account of indisputable and self-explanatory details. It's not inert and self-explanatory. The interesting thing about history is the fact that people disagree about it. Howard Zinn, a very different take on American history from Wilfred Maclay. You thought that history was just about those dates? Could be that your high school history teacher didn't understand this aspect of history. Most likely they did, but not so much, okay? Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. Absolute fact. Why is in dispute. Absolutely in dispute. Did the United States provoke the attack? We were the aggressors? Or did the Japanese launch the attack on an unsuspecting United States? Historians disagree on this. You think that's significant? Absolutely. So we have to learn what the questions are. Well, that one, I just gave you an example. Cause of World War II, right? What is the right interpretation? Now, that's not one we're going to do in this class. We've got the Revolutionary War. We've got the 7 Years' War. We've got King Philip's War. We've got the War of 1812. We've got the Mexican War. We've got war. Now you know what the questions are. There's 10 or 12 questions right there. And I didn't even mention the Civil War. But keep the questions in mind. Next page. The first full paragraph. Finally, I'd like to offer a word about the book's title, which forms one of the guiding and recurrent themes. He's telling you what I've already told you. Titles matter. Guiding and recurrent themes of the book. As the book argues from the very outset, the Western Hemisphere was inhabited by people who had come from elsewhere. In the ultimate sense of the word, there are no indigenous people in the Western Hemisphere. Some people got here earlier than others, right? Okay. Why did they come? Why did they come? Question. The lure of freedom. Remember the syllabus now? Freedom, equality, great ideas. Okay? You put these things together. The lure of freedom is important. The space to pursue their ambitions, that is freedom, in ways their respective old worlds did not permit. There's no space, there's too many people, the political structures deny freedom. And so they came for freedom in many cases. Which is another way of saying what? Hope. Hope for freedom, land of hope, people hoping for freedom. Hope has both theological and secular meanings. You don't have to be a Christian to have hope. Spiritual ones as well as material ones. So here's one of the great questions. Why did people come to the Western Hemisphere, the New World? We'll find that in chapter 2. Keep that in mind in chapter 2. Who came and why? They're different. They're not all the same at all. Even those who are bitterly critical, Maclay continues, of America, Howard's in, and find its hopes to be delusions, cannot deny the enduring energy of those hopes. They're not immune to their pull. They would generally argue, though, that the hopes have been dashed, never realized. To the point, then, that whatever is wrong with the United States, its political structure, its culture, whatever, has to be radically changed. You have that in our politics today. People who believe that the United States as a democratic capitalist republic has to be changed radically to make way for the 21st century. But that is not the point of view of this text. Of course, hope and opportunity are not synonymous with success, and here Maclay adds complexity, context, keywords. History is complex. In order to understand what really happened in the past, you have to understand that basic idea and then the context of the time you are looking at. A group of historians writing in the early 20th century said that all of history could be interpreted by looking at economic causes. All you had to do was look at economic causes and you would find the answer to whatever your historical question was. Well, that was great. That was real simple, right? But it's not true. We're not all motivated by economic issues, okay? Economic interests. Some of us are motivated by religious interests. Some of us are motivated by fear. Some of us by love. It has nothing to do with economics. Some of us are motivated by complexity. Simple answers are usually not true. So beware of those authors, teachers, whatever, who offer you a simple explanation about complex events and do not give you any context whatsoever. If I were to ask you if you were all the same out there, everybody in the class would say, no, we're not all the same. Well, if a nation of very diverse, different people come together, the answers are going to be very different, aren't they, as to why? So how could the history be simple and complex? Can't be. Now, we can get bogged down in too much complexity. That's a danger. And then it's so complex it doesn't tell us anything. And here's the truth in life. The middle way is the hard way. And in this middle paragraph here, Maclay is going to tell us that all human beings are flawed. None of us are perfect. Paul puts it differently in the book of Romans. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. All have sinned. We are all imperfect. We're all flawed. We're all selfish, greedy, hateful at various times. Mistaken. How can you create a perfect country out of flawed material like that? You can't. And in fact, one needs to take that flawed nature of human beings into account in creating political structure. If you don't, the people are going to let you down. Things are not going to work out the way you had planned. That we're going to study when it comes to the American Revolution. The Founding Fathers had one idea in the midst of the American Revolution about who the people were and what they were. And by the end, the middle of the 1780s, they realized, you know what? The people aren't that good. It ain't working. We got to start over again. Which is why you have the Constitution you do. Reality set in. Well, we continue here with the last paragraph. What we should remember, though, is that the history of the United States and the West more generally includes the activity of searching self-criticism. The Western culture is not like most other nations. In Russia, a classroom of history cannot criticize Vladimir Putin. And during the old Soviet Union days, you couldn't criticize the Soviet leadership either. You couldn't criticize the Communist Party. No. In the People's Republic of China today, there's no tolerance for criticism of Red China in the history classrooms of that nation. And in Japan, although it is a democracy, the culture is such that it is not self-critical. Not self-critical. Here in the West, and especially in the United States, we criticize ourselves. And we failed to do this, and we failed to do that, and maybe we can do better next time. To the point, of course, that Howard Zinn comes along, and there are many others, to argue that we got to trash the whole thing and start over again, folks. The whole structure is wrong. Can't succeed with this structure. See? We allow that. It's okay. There is a tradition of self-criticism. And so there's going to be criticism in this book. And for those of you who perhaps are super patriotic and you don't want to read anything critical, that's not human beings. We have not always lived up to our best ideas. So Maclay is going to tell you when he thinks that happened. So will I. When we understand the context and the difficulties that people faced, we are not going to allow ourselves condescension of those people. We're not going to look down our noses and think that we are morally better than they are. Now, we may be. Don't just automatically assume that. Okay? Think like this for a moment. What will those 500 years in the future say about us and our moral failings? Wow. I can't believe how those people live. And they may do that if they don't recapture the historical context of our times. But if they do recapture the context, they might be a little more sympathetic. They might temper their criticism a little bit. They might understand that we were caught in our times just as people 500 years ago were caught in their time. So let's have some empathy, some understanding. History does that. Good history helps us have empathy for those in the past and the challenges they faced. So we get to chapter 1. What's the title? Beginnings, right? Beginnings of what? Settlement and unsettlement. So we're going to be looking for the subtitle there, settlement and unsettlement, those two words. And we're going to see, well, what does he mean by settlement and unsettlement? When we see those words, we're going to underline them or highlight them or whatever. And you see a little bit of my highlighting system here with the that I've been showing you here. And I had some pictures there of other textbooks. I'm going to take a moment. Let's go back there, Sam, just for a second. All right, so there's your text, Land of Hope, Wilford Maclay. Let's see the next video, or the next slide. Here's another textbook. This is not a full history of the United States. This is just about the last half century since the end of World War II. The title of the book is Unfinished Journey. Do you think that is an admiring textbook of the United States since World War II, or do you think that is a largely critical textbook? Unfinished Journey. And so Chafee is going to emphasize all of our failings, all the facts that suggest our journey towards perfection is unfinished. We're not there yet. Now, is he right? We're not there yet? Yes, he's right about that, but because all he basically does in this book is tell you about our failings, you lose track, you lose the context of the fact that the United States has been responsible for the peace in this world since the end of World War II and for the spread of democracy, for the rising standard of living. We are the engine of this. But Chafee's not interested in that. He's interested in our failings, so we will engage in radical change. Title. They matter. Mr. Chafee and Mr. Maclay would not be on the same page, pun intended. Okay? History always begins in the middle of things. You will recognize this as one of the quiz questions. He talks about the middle of things as opposed to the beginning time and time again. It was paramount. If you are looking for repeated phrases, which you should be doing, then you would have picked up on this. And most of you did. Most of you did well on that quiz. The middle of it. And then he compares it to your life. You're not the origin, right? You're not the basic model. You came along in the middle of things. Right, so that was, again, page 1. He's talking about something that's going to be important in this chapter. The new world comes along in the middle of things, doesn't it? Next page. So you see at the top of the page, the end of that first paragraph, middle of things, middle of thing. Repetition. Repetition is a clue to significance or importance. And at the end of the second paragraph, he talks about too much detail muddies the picture and defeats the ultimate purpose of the text. He is trying to get a message across to you, but if he bombards you with too much detail, how successful is he? You have to wade through too much to find what's significant, right? Now you have some wading to do. We have 200 and some odd pages here, and it's not all important. See? But he's done a lot of that eliminating for you. Not going to be a chapter on the arts. So those of you who are art history fans, sorry. What we call history, third paragraph, is the same way. It's not the sum of the whole past. It doesn't include everything, and it couldn't. Instead, it is a selection out of that expansive river of the past. What is most important for Maclay? Other than technological advancement. What's he going to focus on? Politics. That eliminates a lot of history. And really, only that politics that really informs your generation. Got to remember that. I'm looking for the political here, especially the political, as I read, especially the political that has lasting consequences. See? You got to whittle this down. Not the story of everything. And then the last, couple of sentences, he says, and it is crafted, at last in this middle paragraph, it is crafted with a particular purpose in mind to help us learn above all else the things we must know to become informed, self-aware, dedicated citizens of the United States of America, capable of understanding and appreciating the nation in the midst of which we find ourselves, of carrying out our duties as, does this sound like he wants radical revolution? No, he doesn't agree with Zinn. He doesn't agree with Chafee and all the others. He doesn't agree with half the American history professors in the country today. And neither do I. So, and citizens interested in defending what is best in our institutions, but also helping to improve. See, it's not so conservative that, no change, right? That's not it. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Does God expect you to just accept that and go on sinning? Is he happy with that? If you think so, you should start reading those little epistles from John. 1 John, 2 John, 3 John. He talks about being an overcomer. Overcoming what? Sin. The country can and should get better. But Maclay doesn't want us to tear down what's already good. Freedom, democracy. Okay. Next page. Bottom of the page. He tells you he's not terribly interested in the earliest civilizations of the New World. The Incas, the Mayas, the Aztecs, and so forth. Why not? Because he's a racist. You gonna buy that? What is the criteria that matters to Maclay? Why are we the way we are currently politically? These peoples every bit as human as you and I, did not have a direct impact on the way we are today in America, in the United States. Not Leif Erikson either, for that. Not consequential to our moment. That's why. Next page. And then he says, corrective, but not so fast. But if you didn't pick up on what he said about these previous New World civilizations, you wouldn't get the not so fast. Because he's going to come back to his title, Land of Hope. Maybe this statement needs to be modified. Maybe the lost civilizations of the first Americans and the episodic voyages of Erickson and other Norsemen taken together do point powerfully, if indirectly, toward the recognizable beginnings of American history, the theme of the text. Well, they point to the presence of America in the world's imagination as an idea, as a land of hope, of refuge, opportunity, a second chance. A second chance at life for those willing to take it. Now, barring the possibility of an accident, imagine a South Sea Islander out in his canoe and a storm comes up and he's swept away from his island home in the Southwest Pacific, and he has no choice. The winds are blowing east and he ends up in South America. So now that could happen, right? If he can survive. And he didn't do it by choice. He wasn't looking for, well, maybe by the time he saw the land, he was hopeful that he might live. Okay? But most people journeyed to the New World looking for something better. Hopeful. Hopeful. Whether they came over the ice bridge of the Bering Strait or whether they crossed the Atlantic Ocean in 18th or 17th century tubs like the Pilgrims, they were hopeful about something. So, land of hope. They want a second chance. There was something about the old world, the old place they were, that made them unhappy, or perhaps ostracized, fearful of their lives. I probably don't set out across the ice bridge of the Bering Strait if I'm confident that I can beat that other tribe, defeat that other tribe that is threatening my family. But I feel like I have no choice. So we'll go to the next page. The paragraph just before the page break. You see that blank space? That blank space screams something at us. So the paragraph just before that, when you see the blank space, you're paying close attention, just like you would with a new paragraph, or a new chapter. All right? There's a break in thought here. There's a break in purpose. Maybe that paragraph just before it is going to summarize something important. Otherwise, why bother with the break? You've got to have done that for a reason. Find out why. Question. So the West had long been thought of in Europe as a direction offering renewal and discovery. So Europeans, when they thought of the West, the New World, they thought of it as a place of hope, a place of wealth and plenty. There's that hope word again, a vivid anticipation of what the New World could be like. And as we shall soon see, the shape taken on by this expectation would owe more to the yearnings of the old world. Yes, it was the yearnings of the old world, the anxiety, the fear, whatever, that would cause them to leave it. And then there's the hope that the new world will be better, not the certainty. But my gosh, we can't stay here. And so that paragraph break, that space there, is telling you to pay attention to the paragraph just before it for some kind of summary. And then you pay particular attention to the paragraph just after it because he's starting a new thought. So since we must begin in the middle of things, we will start our history of America in the middle of Europe's history. Most of us today, our ancestors came from Europe. Okay? Not all of us, but most of us. In fact, the two histories cannot be understood apart from one another. Those white people who came here brought attitudes, ideas from Europe. They transplanted them. Christianity. One. America, Maclay says, is best understood as an offshoot of Europe. That was one of the quiz questions. Context. Even the name America comes from the first name of the Italian-born navigator, Amerigo Vespucci. Well, let's go down to the next paragraph. I've got all kinds of highlights here. We see that he brings up those two words that we were keeping track of, settlement and unsettlement. And settlement is obvious. They're coming into the New World and they're creating settlements, right? But unsettlement was equally important. Those people never come to the New World unless there isn't some kind of unsettlement in Europe. That is, rapid change usually. Their lives are not secure. Things are unsettled. Europe is being transformed rapidly. And people don't understand fully what's going on. Settlement and unsettlement. And then what about the people already living here? The Native Americans, as we call them. The arrival of these white sojourners, is that going to have any impact on their settlement? Of course it does. It creates great what? Using our words. Unsettlement. Tragic unsettlement. So, settlement and unsettlement. Unsettlement in Europe, causing people to flee, and when they get here, unsettlement in the New World. When the Pilgrims, as we've already seen, landed there at Plymouth, there had already been great unsettlement amongst the Native Americans there, right? And the Pilgrims added to it. Next page. What's happening in Europe, and this isn't explicitly explained, but it is there, that you're getting the rise of the modern nation state. The kings of important places like France, Great Britain, Spain are gathering all the power to themselves. They're controlling their barons, right? And bringing power to the monarchy. And then greed is enforcing or creating a desire to go abroad for wealth. There's even a religious aspect here, especially amongst the Catholics. Is Columbus, well, more about Columbus in just a minute, but why is he coming to the Indies? Why does he sail west? Power, right? Power for the Spanish king, Spanish monarch. Isabel and Ferdinand invest in Columbus. Why? Because they want to lose a lot of money? No. Because they just want to get rid of him? They hope they never see him again? No. Power. Wealth, gold. In the Indies. What if you're one of those people in Europe that's been trampled on by the rise of the power of the monarchies? In the next paragraph, if any one of these innovations or disruptions had come along by itself without the company of others, the increase of technology, we know all about the increase of technology, don't we? I spent 3 days preparing this PowerPoint because I did not understand the technology well enough. I could have done it had I understood it well enough in about 3 hours. New text, right? So I had to start over. So I spent 9 hours instead of 3 hours. By the end of it, I understood the technology. But technological change. My computer just barely survived being thrown against the wall. But President Baker would have taken a very dim view of that. Technological change brings what? Unsettlement. But it also allows for these great monarchs to send their ships across the seas, which will bring unsettlement in the New World. And settlement. And there's another one of those paragraph breaks. You see my double mark and my star. That says to me now, pay attention, and I go back to do my reviewing. That's why I mark it, because I am going to go back and read it again. But I'm not going to read the parts that are not marked. I'm just going to read the marked parts. And with a $29 text, as opposed to a $100 text, you can afford to do that. says the exploration and settlement of America would be one of the most consequential of these flames. Change. Okay. The product of a host of great European disruptions, economic, social, religious, technological, and cultural, all these forces moving people to come across the oceans. That would have been a great quiz question. What are the forces moving the explorers to come across the Atlantic Ocean? So you got all kinds of clues there. You've got a summary of the causes of great exploration. You've got a paragraph break where you should have been paying attention. And I would feel emboldened then to ask you for word, but I did not. Because I'm kind. But now you know. Okay? The causes, great change, transformation. Go to the next page. Well, Europe is one thing. Well, who were the most important players? This is it real quickly. By 1492, 4 such national states were emerging in Europe. France, England, Spain, and tiny Portugal. Because of their great navigational, technological prowess. Portuguese were ahead of everybody in the 15th century in terms of being able to navigate. Their king was a great navigator himself. So again, one of those summary. And of course, which of these is the most important? Didn't Maclay tell you which of these nations was the most important for us? But now you know who the other players were, France, Spain, Portugal, but the most important was England. And then there are people that are important. The next page, very top. Christopher Columbus. I would bet still that everybody has heard of Christopher Columbus. So you take your prior knowledge and you apply it to the class. Christopher Columbus, oh yeah, I know that's an important guy. Refresh your memory. Because I'm going to ask you about important people. It doesn't matter whether you admire Christopher Columbus or you do not. Okay? In our modern culture, Christopher Columbus is not seen as a hero anymore. But when I was your age, Christopher Columbus was absolutely a hero. It took great courage to do what he did. And so you need to be aware of the important people. Usually you can tell a person's importance by what? I mentioned this the other day in class. What? Yeah, how many times they're mentioned, or you already know they're important, Christopher Columbus, George Washington, and so forth. Or the historian says, and the most important person was, okay, can't be any clearer than that, but if you're not looking for that kind of interpretation, then it just goes right in one eye and out the ear, okay, or whatever. Doesn't catch anything because you weren't attuned to asking questions. You weren't saying to yourself what's important, so that word important didn't stick. All right, last bit. And here we are at the end of the chapter. We're going to pay real close attention to some kind of summary of what's significant. So down at the bottom it says, America is hard to see. He's referencing Robert Frost's poem there. Columbus had trouble seeing America for the new thing that it was and could be and eventually would become. He doesn't even know, Christopher Columbus, that he has discovered new continents, does he? He called the native inhabitants Indians because he thought he was where? In the East Indies, off the coast of Asia. And the great Western Hemisphere got in his way. The world was bigger than he thought it was. He never realized it. Could not see it for what it was. If we don't have the proper context of understanding our past, we will not see it for what it was or is. That is part of the human condition. Nobody has perfect context, perfect understanding. Again, for all have sinned, which means all are inadequate. I shall digress for just a moment, but do you realize your mind is not perfect? It is not a perfect computer. I don't know how many of you have seen the original Star Trek, right? with Spock. And the Vulcans had prized themselves on eliminating emotion by the 23rd century so that they could reason more clearly. Human beings have a problem. We haven't eliminated emotion. We don't reason as clearly as we need to. Don't you think by now, I don't know how many thousands of years of human history, if we were primarily rational, that is, we thought like computers, don't you think we would have eliminated all the disagreements in this world? Don't you think we would have all come to the same conclusions if we were all rational like computers? You put information into a computer, you get the same answer, folks. Right? How come everybody in the world is on a different page then? Answer. We're not computers. We're not rational. Pretty simple. Emotion gets in the way. My love, my hate, my passion, my greed, my pride gets in the way of my reason. Back to the text. And every one of us is like part of the human condition. A recurrent feature of human history that we find is not always what we were looking for, and what we accomplish is not always what we set out to do. Do you know the founding fathers were unhappy by the time they were old men with what had happened in America? Yes. When they were old men, they thought that America was headed in the wrong direction. Not what they intended, but it's what they started. Final paragraph. Hence, too, the reality that Columbus's journeys were also the beginning of a great collision of cultures, a process that nearly always entails tragic and bitter consequences. Hence the cruel irony. As we shall see, that the settlement of America by newcomers would also produce a profound what? Unsettlement. Now you're paying attention because you remembered settlement, unsettlement from the beginning, right? Of the chapter. You followed the argument for those who were not newcomers. The fresh start for the world came at a heavy price. For those who were already settled on the land. Men and women for whom San Salvador was not a new world being discovered, but an old and familiar world about to be transformed. He might have said destroyed, and he would have been fair. Settlement, unsettlement. Land of hope. Read with a purpose. And I'll see you next time.